Kia ora everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk in front of you today. I know you're thinking this is probably a bit strange. We've got a cherry orchardist coming to talk to you about electricity, and I'll tell you what, it is a little bit strange because I'm quite the strange cherry orchardist. I went to university in Wellington. I got a computer science degree. I then travelled to Sydney and spent 12 years there building a startup called Grad Connection, which is a website for university students that were looking for their first job that 4 out of 5 Australian graduates ended up using to find their first job. And that was acquired by Seek in 2019. And this gave me the opportunity for my wife and I to move our young family back to New Zealand. It's some place that we always wanted to come home to, and the luxury of choice of where in New Zealand that we wanted to move to. We wanted to move to the Queenstown Lakes, Central Otago region, mainly because we'd been back there every year for skiing and for holidays, and just fell in love with the place. And we were looking for houses in the Queenstown and Wanaka region. And what actually happened was we found the perfect house that we were looking for about 10 minutes north of Cromwell or 30 minutes south of Wanaka. And this house had everything that we were looking for except one thing. It had 9 hectares of land. I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I always knew it was going to be something in the climate change space. And so we did what anyone in Central Otago would do with 9 hectares of land, and planted 9,300 fruit trees. To put that in context, that's about 25 kilometres of fruit trees, which is a really large orchard for an individual grower. Anything larger than that, and we start to move sort of down the conglomerate level of farming. 80 tonnes of cherries is about what we'll produce at full production, which will be happening in a couple of years. If everything goes well this season, which it never ever does in horticulture, we were expecting about 50 tonnes to come off the trees. But here's the kicker. I planted 9,300 cherry trees, and then I thought, you know what? I wonder how much carbon they actually sequester. So I got the experts in to calculate it, and the answer was actually not that much. 3.8 tonnes of emissions on a 25-year linear model, which was enough to cover the 2.5 tonnes of fertilizer required to feed the trees every year. But here's the elephant in the room. If I wanted to run a cherry orchard that was not good for the climate, I would have to emit 60 tonnes of carbon using fossil fuels in order to run a productive cherry orchard. And I just thought, I'm starting with a blank canvas here. Surely this can be done a little bit better. So I'm going to take you on a little journey back down to my orchard, which is about 5 hours drive from here, that I would like to extend an invitation to anyone in this room is always welcome to come and check it out. I know many people in this room already have. And I'm going to show you how we built what I think is the world's first zero fossil fuel farm, or 100% electric farm. And in the next few slides, I'm going to explain to you how we save about $50,000 a year in energy, how we have a payback of around 6 years, and most importantly, how we've eliminated those 60 tonnes of emissions. Now, one thing to take into account is that we started with a blank canvas. I actually have no figures I can share with you, real figures I can share with you around what our emissions would have been. So I've largely had to make it up. And here are some global assumptions that we'll be using for this exercise today. $2.50 a litre. I know it's about $2 a litre for diesel at the moment, but it has been $3, so I think $2.50 is probably going to be a pretty good future average, at least for now. And most New Zealanders will pay around about 30 cents per kilowatt hour for power, including all line charges, levies, admin charges, that kind of thing. And all of these figures are exclusive of GST, so you'll have to think about this when applying this to your household. Now, when we bought our orchard, it came with a really, bare land, it came with a really clunky old diesel pump that was on its last legs, and to be honest, wasn't really going to be sufficient for watering 9,300 cherry trees. And this was the first purchasing decision that we had come up. And we thought long and hard about the best way to do it, but eventually we fell on, well, if there are a lot of farmers in New Zealand that irrigate with electricity, so why don't we just do the same? It might become a surprise to you that many cherry orchards in Central Otago still irrigate with diesel. And so here are the figures. And the most important thing is the market payback, 9 years. Right, 9 years to pay back on saving on electricity compared to spending on diesel, which is actually pretty good. We expect an electric pump like this to last somewhere between sort of 10 to 12 years, which means for irrigation at least, we were right at the forefront where we can make the decision, and the market price is probably appropriate that it's going to be the right decision, not only for the climate, but also for my farming business. What about frost fighting? So most of you in the room are probably from an agricultural or horticulture background. You understand what frosts are, but for those that don't, a frost is caused by a cold layer of air being trapped by a warm layer of air above it, right? The warm layer above is air above it. From people who are from Wanaka will know that's called the inversion layer. And what these fans do is they pull the warm air down from above and mix it around the orchard to bring the average temperature of the orchard up. If we fall below critical temperature, well, then our fruit buds die. If our fruit buds die, then our blossom dies. If our blossom dies, we don't get pollination. If we don't get pollination, we don't get fruit set, we don't get a crop, and therefore we don't get revenue, and the bank comes knocking. So frost fighting fans are super important for horticulture. And unfortunately, in New Zealand at the time, there were no electric frost fighting fans available. It just so happened when I was researching how best that I could convert a diesel frost fighting fan to electric, that I realized that there was a company in South Africa, of all places, that was now making electric frost fighting fans. And through the help of ICA, through a demonstration grant, we were able to import these fans sight unseen during the middle of COVID and install them using local contractors and get them up and running. And the figures speak for themselves. High amounts of power use. Traditional frost fighting fans that you'll see all over the countryside will burn anywhere between 30 to 40 litres of diesel an hour, depending on the model, which is a serious large amount of carbon, considering we frost fought last year for about 120 hours, right? So the payback on it is significant, and with the help of an eco-grant, the payback actually brings us back to square with the house, which I'm very appreciative for, and we save a whopping 23 tonnes a year by installing the electric version rather than the incumbent diesel product. Something all of you are familiar with is road vehicles. I have two of them, one for my family and one for my business. And one of the misconceptions about road vehicles, we've had thousands of farmers come to see us in the last sort of 12-month period to see what we've been doing. And one of the common sort of things I hear is that electric vehicles, they're great for people in the city, but they're not very good for people in rural areas. And I have to challenge this all the time because it couldn't be further from the truth. Literally, the more Ks you drive, the better you are off in an electric vehicle. And I live 15 Ks from town. I have a young family. We have to drive to school 2 times a day. That's 60 kilometres of driving right there, right? Plus the odd trip up here to Christchurch, whatever it might be. We drive a lot of Ks a year. So these are done on our Ks, a rural New Zealand family and businesses Ks, right? Which is about 3 times what the average New Zealander will drive. And so what I've done is I've done these comparisons we've got a Hyundai Kona electric vehicle, and I've done this with a comparison with the petrol version of the same car, including the clean car rebate. And you can see here what the payback is here. Now, if you're anything like me, you buy a car and you hold on to it until it's absolutely dead. And so for this reason, even at the market payback level, we're pretty happy and confident that these cars are going to pay themselves off, which is great. So I'm going to take a little bit of break from our table format now and talk about New Zealand's first and only electric tractor. And I had to take a break from this because there's not really any comparison. Orchards our size will use a tractor that is about 80 horsepower, which, what's that, about 55, 60 kilowatts, right? And we didn't have that option. However, I am super grateful for Duncan and Tony from Loxley Innovation, who are Lincoln University alumni that built New Zealand's only electric tractor. It is a tiny little 18 horsepower equivalent. They basically gutted it and put in the inverter, the motor, and the 20 kilowatt hour battery pack. And this allowed us to do something really special. We built what I think is the world's first fully electric foliage sprayer with the help of MPI through the SFFF fund, right? Now, one of the big problems about traditional sprayers is that they'll use somewhere around about 45 kilowatts of power on the PTO. PTO is the big drive shaft that goes out the back of a tractor for you guys that don't know about it. And yeah, that's a significant amount of power. And it doesn't take much math to realize that if you've only got a 20 kilowatt hour battery pack, you're not going to be spraying for very long before you need to charge. It takes us about 6 hours to spray our entire orchard. But with the help of a grant, we built a sprayer that instead of running off a PTO, runs literally off a 15 amp wall socket plug that plugs into the back of the tractor and is driven directly from the tractor batteries. It uses about 15% of the power, which means that we can spray for about 2 hours with this tiny little tractor. And so this is the one thing that I'm now trying to get across to as many farmers as possible, that electric tractors are coming. The trilemma with electric vehicles is size, range, and affordability, and you're allowed to pick 2 of them, right? So if you're going to continue to use the power that you're always using, you're never going to be able to afford that electric tractor. We have to change the implements that we're using to be more effective. And this is the really exciting bit. This is a Monarch tractor. This will be New Zealand's first commercially imported electric tractor, and it arrived in Auckland 2 days ago. I was hoping to have it here for this conference so I could wheel it into the town hall here, but unfortunately that wasn't meant to be. But it is coming to my property. But not only is it New Zealand's first commercial electric tractor, it is actually the first commercial electric tractor to be exported out of the US, which has involved me going to the US a little bit to build a relationship with the founders from Monarch Tractor, right? And one of the big things that has allowed me to do that is the cooperation agreement that now exists between the California government and the New Zealand government around agriculture technology. And the other big one is ICA, who has really helped represent that the whole of New Zealand is behind this. And you can see the figures there, right? We're looking at an 80 horsepower tractor equivalent would be about $80,000, $121,000, and with the help of ICA, we're pretty much square with the house yet again, which means I can take all the risk and I can show New Zealand all about it. So here's the payback on the tractor and the sprayer, which is probably 80% of our tractor hours will be from spraying. And you can see right now the market payback, I couldn't put my hand on my heart and tell any farmer that they can just adopt this technology. But with the help of the New Zealand government, with the help of the New Zealand taxpayer, I'm now in a position where we can save 7 tonnes a year. The payback on this is really significant, and I can spend my time doing what I love, which is demonstrating to other farmers how to electrify. We have a lot of other important machinery, including a 40-year-old electric forklift, which is great when people start to ask me about how long the batteries last. I can tell them, well, this one lasts at least 40 years. And we've had a lot of support from a lot of corporates, including Still, who gave us a whole bunch of free stuff. So that was awesome. Can't really calculate the payback periods on that, but we're very grateful for that all the same. And here is the end figures, right? So we spent quite a bit more than we would have if we had gone down the path of diesel. And I think the big thing here is that we've spent far more than we would have if we would simply sweep our bad behavior under the rug by buying offsets, right? This is the elimination strategy. This is the complete electrification of farm. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about solar? Well, this is a really, really important layer to what it is that I've done and something that I'm really proud of. If we'd gone down the path of continuing to use diesel, we would have spent about $56,000 a year on energy. And by electrifying and running off the New Zealand grid, we halved that overnight, right? So that's an important part to remember. The most savings that you will make is just making the decision to get off a fossil fuel and onto electric technology. With basic solar, we can bring that down to $15,000. And I'll explain what basic solar means in a moment. And then by being smart and interacting with the New Zealand grid and buying power when it's abundant and renewable and highly available, and then selling it back to New Zealand when it isn't readily available and therefore is a lot more expensive, we can actually arbitrage the wholesale spot price market to actually bring money into our farm. My goal is to bring my energy bill down entirely to zero. We're not quite there yet. This is $5,000, including all line charges, all levies, all admin charges. But it gives you a good understanding of the steps that we need to take to make the finances of our farm considerably more resilient. So if we put that together with batteries, we have a 6-year payback period thanks to the New Zealand taxpayer. Solar and batteries are not covered by grants. And you can see here what we've been able to do with the solar system. We've managed to bring the price of power down from 30 cents down to around about 6 cents. And this is something that I really, really like to talk to farmers about, right? We're all worried about the future of energy. The best way to be resilient against that market is to create your own energy, right? Create it for free. And so I'm a big proponent that every farm in New Zealand should have their own personal solar supply. On top of that, batteries, that's a different type of resilience, right? That is for resilience for what happens when the sun isn't shining and the grid isn't operating. You can think of things like an earthquake, where that might be a strong case. Now, I'm not going to say that I can run my business completely or at 100% when the Alpine fault goes off, but I might be able to run in second gear while we wait for the recovery process to occur. And with satellite internet, hopefully, we're in a position where we will be a main hub for communications should that ever happen. And here's the big kicker. How do I get this down to 18 months? And this is not 18 months across any individual thing. This is across everything. And I'd like to introduce you the company that I co-founded, NZ0. My cherries are the first product that is being sold through the NZ0 brand and the certification, right? A certification where we are committing to the New Zealand taxpayer, the New Zealand consumer, and the global consumer that this food is made without the use of any fossil fuels at all, right? It demonstrates real systemic change in the way that we grow our food that's easily auditable and, most importantly, actually really easy for the consumer to understand. right? We built this with the help of Assure Quality, and I'm very, very grateful for a grant from AgMart that allowed us to do this and price trial, all right? So we put our cherries into Farrow Fresh supermarkets up in Auckland, and we achieved about a 15% premium, and I think that's because the consumer understands what we're doing and what we're talking about. Now, if we can remove the complexity from the consumer and we can actually get that 15% premium passed from the consumer back to the farmer, which is another huge system change we need to think about, but let's just imagine in the perfect world that we are able to do that, well, then we're going to be in the position with the whole payback period on everything that I've done falls to 18 months, which means it's a no-brainer for every farmer in New Zealand to go down this path. Now, I've given you a classical economics example of payback periods, but what I really want to finish off with is talking about all of the value that we have created beyond just financial payback periods. We have happier and engaged staff. I don't have a problem hiring staff. In fact, my WhatsApp group blows up all the time because everybody wants to come at work at New Zealand's electric orchard. We have better occupational health and safety. There's no PTO, there's no moving parts, right? There's a lot more, it's a lot safer, it's a lot healthier, there's a lot less noise pollution, right? All of these things that can't really be modeled through economics, economic models, are the things that we're now discovering. One thing I didn't mention is that the Monarch electric tractor that we're getting coming in is also driver optional. So instead of having my staff sit there spending all day steering in straight lines, they can do much more than that now. They can actually figure out how to grow really good fruit. How do we increase our yields? How do we increase quality? How do we increase revenue? All of these things can come from this technology adoption. And I'm super excited, right? Because I think New Zealand is probably the best country in the world to go down the path of completely eliminating fossil fuels. And if we can do that, we save $3.5 billion leaving our shores. That's money that stays within New Zealand that's anti-inflationary, right? And on top of that, it stays within our households and within our businesses. And so I'll leave you with this. If there's one thing that I'm hoping I've departed on you today, it's that the next purchasing decision you make for your business and your home, I hope you make it electric. Kia ora.